bill that is now the Labor government trying to push digital ID, always in the name of safety. We're just trying to keep you safe. Well, the Communications Minister, Katie Gallagher, tweeted about this today, saying that, don't worry, you guys, it's not going to be compulsory. Well, Twitter, which is now known as X, has this wonderful element to it now where people can slap on community notes. And that's what they did, saying, look, this actually may be extremely misleading. Pretty ironic, don't you think? This is the government that wants to be the arbiter of truth, who are pushing their misinformation, disinformation bill, and yet they're getting fact-checked. But get this, Katie Gallagher then turned off comments. So nobody could comment on her post trumpeting this digital ID concept, etc., and so on. Hang on a minute, woman. You work for us. Don't you want to know what we think about this? Clearly, the reason why she turned them off was that I imagine the feedback wasn't all that thumbs up, she'll be right, mate, sounds great, can't wait for my digital ID. Because this is yet another thing nobody asked for. Yeah. The government is just pushing their own agenda. They know they are doing the wrong thing. They know the public would be like, hang on a minute, none of this makes sense. They're scared. They're running scared.
And the public are wise to it, you know, this idea that, well, a digital ID, it won't be compulsory. And what do we immediately think? Just like vaccines weren't compulsory either. I mean, you know, unless you wanted to work and have a livelihood. I tell you one politician who is a good servant of the people, and that's Matt Canavan. He explained, even within the bill, the government is proposing, well, listen for yourself, it's pretty shady.
Well, now they're saying a digital ID is voluntary. You should be very careful about the weasel words used by politicians in their own bill. In Section 74 of their own bill, it does say that this can't be used to. You can't use a digital ID to make people access a service. And then later on, in Section 75, subsection 4, it actually says the minister can exempt people from that requirement if it is, wait for it, appropriate to do so. That's it, appropriate to do so.
So when the government said it won't be compulsory, we know it'll be compulsory.
And it bears mentioning this would be the closest thing to a social credit score, right? Because that would have every speeding fine you've ever had, that time you jaywalked, you might have sworn at a police officer once or twice, didn't pay that credit card bill on time July 3 years ago. This would have absolutely everything on you. No government deserves that kind of data. We are private citizens, literally sod off. It is none of your business. And the fact that, as you just explained it, Caleb, and yet they're trying to package that as this is for your safety. We're going to keep your data safe.
If the government was concerned about our safety, they'd be saying we are not going to do this to protect
this is the last thing we're going to do.
But of course, all the apparatus here is being set up for not just the convenience in terms of your identification, but down the track we've got central bank digital currency. You put all of that together and you really end up with something quite pernicious, as we saw during the pandemic in Canada, for instance, where if you protested against the government, you then ended up with your bank account being frozen. So this is not sort of, you know, conspiracy stuff. This is things that we've seen happen in real time very recently. And for Australia to be going down the same road and for politicians to be lying about it and then shutting down discussion is just unacceptable.
Of course.
The United Nations has a problem. How can they control the carbon footprint of the world's citizens? Not the whole world, of course, just the West. The United Nations Conference of Parties 26 gave us an insight into the UN's menu plan, where Scott Morrison watched, without criticising, their demand to reduce the carbon footprint of our food supply. Instead of counting calories, Australians will soon have their culinary delights and choices dictated to us by an unelected socialist bureaucracy. Very soon, government will tell our farmers what they can grow and punish Australian consumers if they buy the wrong things. This has already started, with frightening reforms scheduled for Australian agriculture. The dream of micromanaging individual carbon emissions hinges on the soon-to-be passed so-called Trusted Digital Identity Bill. If Scott Morrison and Barnaby Joyce want to achieve their net zero 2050 dream, freedoms must be slashed, removed. It is only through the relentless digital stalking of citizens that the Liberal Nationals government can micromanage purchasing choices. Businesses are punished with tax, while consumers get their credit score docked. This already happens in China, where a person's shopping list lowers their social credit score until they cannot travel. In Australia, it may be as simple as denying banking services because you dare to drive a four-wheel drive to work. Australian banks have already shown a keen interest in the Trusted Digital Identity Bill, saying it will, quote, allow them to create a rich view of their customers. These are the same banks that already list climate risk as a means to deny loans. When the Liberals tell you that digital identity will make your life easier, remember, there is no such thing as a free lunch. The Economic Forum is meant to be dismissed as a so-called conspiracy theory. If that's the case, why is the Federal Liberal Party copying its policies? Scott Morrison's so-called Trusted Digital Identity Bill is a copy-paste directly from the World Economic Forum's Global Digital Identity Project. It's designed to shift the global economy away from private ownership into what the World Economic Forum calls an access model, where you own nothing and instead rent goods and services from the world's billionaires and billionaire corporations. In other words, the goal of digital identity is a life via subscription. Without assets and ownership, Australians will have no power over government, nor any power over the corporations that want to control people's lives. In their eyes, this will help the world live sustainably. But in reality, it's a form of slavery to a closed-loop economy where you have less and the rich have more, way more. The Liberals have already spent $1 billion of our taxpayer dollars on their digital economy strategy 2030. All they need to make the global socialist dream a reality is to pass the so-called Trusted Digital Identity Bill.